Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm here with my baby Gia. You laughing? Alright, so I'm finally able to get up and film this video. I'm gonna be talking about my birth story, okay? And it is very traumatic in my opinion. I ended up having an emergency C-section. It is not the birth that I necessarily expected to have. So just a heads up, I'm going to be doing minimal editing on this video, so it's going to be very long just because I don't have time to edit. Also, I'm going to be mentioning things such as birth trauma, medical trauma, and if you are sensitive to that type of stuff, then go ahead and click out. Or if you are pregnant right now and you don't want to be freaked out, then go ahead and click out. But I will say, because I was like that when I was pregnant, I didn't want to hear any negative stories. But I will say that at the very least, you should have some sort of emergency or backup plan for whatever your birth plan is, even if you don't have a birth plan, okay? Just have an emergency backup. So I think that those are all the warnings and disclaimers that I need to give for this video. So let's get into it now. All right, so I am 6 weeks postpartum. I gave birth on October 3rd of this year. Well, obviously, 2020. My due date was September 30th. All right, I had to put the baby down because she was not happy. Okay. So I went into labor the morning of October 1st. I started to feel contractions that morning, and then I just stayed home all day because I didn't want to go to the hospital too soon. I wanted to wait until my water broke, or else to the point where my contractions were so painful that I just couldn't manage it at home anymore. So that morning, the afternoon, and then by nighttime, the contractions were painful. They were coming on strong. So I ended up going to the hospital, checking in at about 11 p.m. that night. And so they take you into, at least for me, they took me into like a labor and delivery little triage kind of area where they kind of monitored my progression before they checked me in and put me into a room because my water had not broken yet. So they checked my cervix and I was still 1 centimeter dilated. And the week prior, when I just went to my routine checkups, I was 1 week, I was 1 centimeter dilated, and I was still 1 centimeter dilated, even though I was in all that pain that night. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So I was just waiting in a hospital bed. The contractions were, I forgot how close they were, but they were too close for comfort, okay? So I was in pain. And they would come in like every hour or so. I want to say that I was in that room maybe for a total of 2 or 3 hours. And then finally, when they did a cervical check, I was at 3 centimeters or 3.5. And they were like, okay, so we're gonna check you into a room tonight. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank God. And she was like, do you want the epidural? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I want the epidural. Give it to me now if you can. So they checked me into the room where I was going to give birth. Okay, so the anesthesiologist comes in, they set me up with my IV and do all that kind of stuff. The anesthesiologist comes in and then he gives me my epidural, and I asked him, I was like, will this last, or how long does this last? Will it last until I give birth? And he was like, yes, it's gonna last until you give birth. I was like, oh my gosh, thank God. You know that feeling? Like, I just felt like such a sense of relief. I was like so grateful for him, okay? I was so grateful. And so did the epidural, and I started to feel better. I want to say it, if I remember correctly, I don't remember a lot of stuff, to be honest. I don't remember everything clearly step by step. And I think it's because I blacked out. I mentally blocked out things because it was just a traumatic experience for me. And then during the time when I did feel pain, I feel like I blacked out from the amount of pain that I was in. So a lot of things are a blur. Then they inserted a catheter. I didn't feel it because by that time the epidural had started to work, and I was just like chilling in the room, like, okay, I'm just gonna, I think I went to sleep or something. So that way, you know, I figured by the next morning I was going to give birth, I guess. I don't know. It's my first baby. I didn't know what to expect. And also the first nurse that I had when I got checked in, like, she was so, I freaking loved her. Her name was Michaela. She was like so professional. For each day that I was in the hospital, I had a morning nurse and a night nurse. And I was in the hospital a total of 6 days. I was not expecting to be there that long. So that first nurse that I had, I loved her. And you know, when you're in an environment, no matter what it is, even like, you know, since I'm a hairdresser, even when you go to a salon or something like that, and you know, when you get that one stylist who just like, she takes charge, like she's like aggressive, not in a bad way, but just aggressive when it comes to like her job, and you feel secure, like, oh, she knows what she's doing. So that's what I felt like with my first nurse. The next nurse, so that was that night. The next morning, I got a new nurse, and I had her twice during my stay, and I feel like she should be fired. She honestly felt it. She gave me the vibe of somebody who was like an assistant or something, or like a student in training. And I don't know if she was she wasn't compassionate. And then also I felt like she was like neglectful. Like I would vomit and then she would just leave me there, and I would have to ask for basic things. It's like, can I have a bag to throw up in? Like, you see me throwing up here, you know? And I don't know if she was just incompetent. Like, you know how some people, they're just like airheads, or if she was purposely neglecting me as a patient. I don't know, but I'm traumatized from her. Okay, so I had her the next morning. By that time, my husband told me that the epidural started to wear off by noon, so she was still there. Okay, and yeah, by that time I was feeling every inch of labor. Okay, and it was excruciating pain. Before I ever got pregnant, before I ever had a baby, when I would get my period, I would have really bad periods. I would have terrible cramps. And so in my head, I mean, I didn't think that it was going to be the same as labor, but I felt like I was like mentally prepared in a way, like to a degree of what kind of pain that I was going to be in, but I was not prepared at all. Like, contractions, everybody's different. But contractions for me felt like the worst period cramps of my life times 100, okay? Or 1,000. So by that time, the epidural wore off, and I was feeling all of the pain, and I let my nurse know. I was like, I could feel pain now. And she was kind of just like, I felt like she didn't like believe me. And it's like, bitch, I'm not lying. Like, why would I lie? Like, oh, I want another epidural, or so, whatever. So anyways, they didn't give me another epidural yet, but they would like give me like these boosters, and it would take like 20 minutes to kick in. And girl, when it took 20 minutes to kick in, I was like watching, because you know, if you've given labor before, I think most hospitals are like this. Like, you're in the little bed, and then on the wall directly in front of you is usually a clock, and I was counting every freaking minute, because they gave me a button that I could push that was like a boost of, allegedly it was a booster of the epidural. So every 20 minutes I would press the button, and you know how like you have to switch sides, because like it doesn't, you have to like lay on one side then lay on another side, so that way it can be evenly distributed on your body. And I was still in pain, you guys. I was still in pain. It was not freaking working, okay? And I'm laughing now, but I think I'm laughing as like a coping mechanism. So, yeah. So time went on. I was in excruciating pain. The epidural wore off. The boosters were not working. And I think during this nurse's shift, I think it was during her shift, that I got another epidural, if I remember correctly. I got another epidural, and it was by another guy. and he was just, and mind you, I'm like freaking out by now. And he was just like, oh, like it probably wasn't done correctly the first time. Like, oh, like I got you. Like we're gonna do this, whatever. So he gives me another epidural and leaves. And I'm kind of like, do I feel it? Do I not feel it? Do you know what I mean? Sometimes I'm like that when it comes to pain. You know, it's kind of like when you take a placebo pill, but then you know that you take a placebo and you're like, wait, do I feel it? Do I not? Or else, like, you know what, like the first time you drink or something like that, you're like, wait, am I drunk? Am I not drunk? Do I feel it? Do I not? Do you know what I mean? That's like maybe like a horrible analogy, but whatever. I was kind of like, do I feel it? Do I not? And it's like, no, I'm still in pain. So that next epidural did not work, and I was in excruciating pain. So that evening, I got the nurse that I hated left, thank God, and I got another nurse who was a freaking angel. Yes, the next nurse that I got, like, she came into the room and she was like taking charge and whatever. She was like, you know, getting the rundown from the last nurse and blah blah blah. And I felt like she was like going out of her way to like to, you know, she was just going out of her way doing her job to like make me feel comfortable. You know, she was talking to me, talking to my husband, all of that. And also she just made me feel like, okay, like I got this, like I'm gonna be able to to birth this baby, and I'm gonna live and everything's gonna be okay. And so yeah, that was Friday night. So by that time I had been in labor for, I don't know, it was over 24 hours at that point. I can't do the math right now, but it was over 24 hours. 24 plus 12. So at that point I was probably in labor maybe like 36 hours or something. And so again, we kept doing the boosters. They were not working. I was in excruciating pain this entire time. You know, they give you a chart that says, that's like one being you're not in any pain at all, and 10 being like you're having surgery with no anesthesia. And I was like, well, I'm at a freaking 10, okay? Like I feel like I'm dying. And so since the boosters and nothing was working, they had to call another anesthesiologist to give me another epidural. I forgot to say that, so they kept checking to see how much I was dilating, but I never progressed past, I think the next morning I got to an 8, but I would dilate a little bit, then I would go back a little bit. I would dilate a little bit, then I would go back a little bit. And that's because since I was in so much pain, every time that I would have a contraction, I would like tense up, and then I would regress. And then also because I was tensing up, I started to feel extreme pain like in my neck and shoulders up here. So I was like tensing my whole body like this during the whole contraction. And it got to the point, my neck and shoulders got to the point where like I couldn't move anymore. Like I could not lift myself. I couldn't sit up. I was like paralyzed because my neck and shoulders were just like, my muscles like gave out because I was tensing up so badly. So when nobody knew why the epidural was not working on me. So then another anesthesiologist, before he came in, he was like, in all these surgeries, you know, they didn't plan to have to, I guess, give me. They should have had more anesthesiologists on working that night, because we had to wait for him to get out of surgery or do whatever the hell he was doing. And I waited 2 hours. And I was in, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, I was a 10, okay? I was vomiting. My neck, my shoulders hurt. I couldn't move. And so the nurse sat me up, I guess, in a position, it's called like crown position, where you're like sitting up, kind of like in a squat position, but in your hospital bed, to help the baby like come down more, because the baby was also not descending into the birth canal, okay? And I think prior to this also, they had broken my water. Yeah, so I think I got to a point, I forgot how many centimeters I was dilated, but they broke my water. And then when they break your water, they also put fluid inside your uterus. Like they put like a tube up there and put some other kind of fluid, like saline or something, inside your uterus to make up for the water breaking. yeah, but the baby was not coming down and my water was already broken. Something that I forgot to mention is that during this time, they also had me on Pitocin, and that's with no anesthesia. And if you don't know what Pitocin is, it's a medication that they give you to induce labor. It makes your contractions stronger and more painful and brings them closer together. So the anesthesiologist finally comes down after 2 hours, and you guys, when he walked into that room, it could have been, I mean, I don't want to be blasphemous or anything like that, but it could have been Jesus Christ himself. Okay, I was like, oh my gosh, thank God, like thank God. I was like so grateful, like thank God he is finally here. And he just seemed like he knew what he was doing, and he gave me a third epidural. He's like, yeah, I don't know why it's taking, but I'll give you another epidural, but your body just might be metabolizing the epidural. I've only seen this, I forgot how long he's been doing this, but he's like, I've only seen this like maybe one other time in all these years that I've been working. And it was an older man too, so you know, he's working like a long time. He's an anesthesiologist for a long time. So I got another epidural, and it still did not work, you guys. And so they couldn't keep giving me epidurals because it was risky. And so instead, the nurse gave me fentanyl, and that wasn't working either. Else, like maybe I would get like some pain relief, but then it would go away, and it would just be back to square one, and then I would tense up, and then I would regress in my like with dilating and everything like that. And so that was an effing nightmare, because you guys, I guess I mean, I think I called my dad, and I was like, please pray for me. And, you know, it's during COVID-19 times. Like, I had my husband there, thank God. Yeah, by this time, I feel like I was, like, truly, genuinely blacking out, because a lot of that night is a blur. I just remember being in excruciating pain. And also, I remember telling my nurse, like, my angelic nurse, I remember telling her, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm in pain, like, I'm not lying, like, I'm in pain, like, it's not working, because everybody on staff was kind of just like, oh my gosh, like, why isn't this freaking epidural working and whatever. And I felt like I was like pleading to her, like, I'm not lying, like, I'm in a lot of pain. And yeah, I was just telling my nurse, like, I'm not lying, like, I'm in pain, like, I'm in a lot of pain, like, I'm not lying that the epidural is not working. And I remember she was like, don't worry, sweetie, like, we believe you, I believe you, I believe that you're in pain. And that to me was just like so validating. Because like I said, I had dealt with the nurse like earlier that day, and I felt like she either didn't believe me, or she didn't care, or like I said, maybe she was just incompetent. I don't freaking know. But after dealing with that, and then dealing with just all the pain stuff, like, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that night got crazy. Going into early morning, epidural still not working. I'm still in excruciating pain. I'm also not dilating. They had already broken my water. And the next morning, I got the nurse that I hated again. Like, when I saw her freaking walk in, you guys, I just looked at my husband and just gave like a look of just like sorrow. Okay. Sorrow. Because I was like, fuck, like, I can't, not today, but whatever. She was who was available. So the next morning, I'm still in excruciating pain. They call in the next anesthesiologist, who, and it was like a if I remember correctly, it was like a younger girl who, and yeah, there, because the nurse, I had the nurse call the anesthesiologist because I'm like, I'm still in pain, like I'm still in excruciating pain. So the new anesthesiologist comes in, and we tell her like everything, or whatever, they update her on everything that's happened. So then she's like, okay, so she gets an ice pack and she's like putting it like on my legs and stuff. She's like, do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel this? And I'm like, and mind you, like I'm freaking out right now. I'm in excruciating pain still. I've been in excruciating pain for over 36 hours now. Like we're getting up to the 48-hour mark, okay? And she's like, do you feel this? Do you feel this? And I'm like, yes, yes, no, yes, no. And she's like, oh, well, when I put it here, you said that you didn't feel it. But then when I put it here, and it's like, bitch, do you think? I wanted to add that during this portion of my labor, I was also like delirious and delusional. I was saying things that did not make sense, and I thought that it was because of the medication, and I let the anesthesiologist know, and he was like, oh, this medication doesn't have an effect on your brain, it wouldn't make you say these things. But I think that I was just saying things and I was being delusional because I was in such pain. And I mention this because I don't believe that I was in the correct state of mind to be answering certain questions. But here I was answering whether or not I'm in pain, even though they have a monitor that shows them every time that I have a contraction and how strong the contractions are. And the nurse's staff prior probably already told them that my epidural was not taking. Bitch, do you think I'm freaking lying? Like, you think that I'm lying so that way you guys can give me another epidural? Like, I'm not lying. Prior to going into labor, prior to having a baby, I've read that sometimes doctors or nurses are less empathetic toward people, or toward Black women, or toward Black families. And afterward, now I'm starting to wonder, like, did that happen to me? Because I feel like I had to convince a lot of people that I was in as much pain as I was. So this anesthesiologist, she's like, oh, what do you feel here? And I'm like, well, I'm in pain. Like, I don't fucking know. When you're like in an emergency, you're like, it's like I feel it. Like I freaking feel it. Okay. And so she's like, okay, well, she's like, we're gonna wait another hour. We're gonna give it another hour. And then the woman who delivered my baby, she came in. And then they devised a plan. They're like, we're gonna give it another hour, and then we're probably gonna have to do a C-section. And I'm freaking out because I didn't want to do a C-section. And then so they waited another hour. Again, I'm watching the clock, and you guys, this last hour, I swear, I don't know if this is medically possible or not, but this last hour, I felt like the whole time I was having one big contraction. I was having a huge contraction that entire hour. Like, there was no, how contractions, like, you have a contraction, then you have a little bit of time in between. You have a contraction, you have a little bit of time in between. That hour, I'm pretty sure that I was having one contraction the whole time. And they had already taken out my catheter, but then left in like I couldn't urinate. Like, they took out the catheter bag, but then left in I don't know, I'm not like a nurse, but they left in something where I couldn't pee. And I was telling them, I was like, oh my gosh. So I was having one painful long contraction, and also like I felt like my bladder was like extremely full, and like I couldn't urinate at all. And I was telling them like I feel like my stomach is like, I feel like my guts are like full of fluid. I feel like I'm gonna explode. Like, I need this isn't. I was like screaming the whole time. Like, I was screaming. So that hour came and went. They came back in, and then they're like, yeah, we're like, we think that we should do a C-section. And so before agreeing to do a C-section, this is like so hard. Before agreeing to do the C-section, I was scared, okay, you guys, because even though I had been through all of that for 48 hours at that point, like, I was scared because, like, I've never had a surgery ever in my life, and I just had this, like, big fear in my head of having a C-section. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gonna, like, take out my guts and, like, cut through my muscles, and, like, it's gonna be extremely painful, and just all this kind of stuff. Like, I was afraid. So finally, I was like, okay, well, let me call my mom first and ask her. And I called my mom because, you know, you call your mom in a situation like that. I called my mom, and also because she's had a C-section before, she's like, yes, like, she's like, do the C-section. Okay, yeah, she was like, do the C-section. She's like, I wish I could be there with you. And I was like, I wish you could too. I want to edit here to add that my husband was with me during this entire time, and he was definitely advocating for me as much as he could. I feel like when I'm editing this whole video, it seems like I was just in labor alone. I was allowed one person, and I had my husband there, of course, and he was advocating for me as much as he could and supporting me and comforting me and all of that. But if you have had a baby before, and if you're a woman, then you know that it's a little bit different having your husband or boyfriend or baby daddy, whatever, there versus having a woman there, specifically a woman who has given birth before, who knows what to expect. My husband and I, you know, this is our first baby. We didn't know what to expect. And so I feel like we both kind of tolerated more than we should have in this situation because we just did not know. So I want to add that. And so finally, and then also I was just asking them, like, what are the risks and all that, and they're like, well, you'll probably, if you have any more children, you'll probably have to have more C-sections in the future. And I was like terrified, you guys. So they had me like sign off on it, and I had to agree, or whatever, I signed papers agreeing to get a blood transfusion if I needed it. And so they wheeled me off to surgery. My husband is walking with me. They're like, oh yeah, dad's gonna be able to be in the room or whatever. And then finally when we get there, they're like, oh yeah, he can't be in the room. We're gonna have to put you under general anesthesia. So they had to put me under general anesthesia, knock me out completely because my body wasn't responding to the epidural or any of the pain medication. They didn't want to take a chance of just doing local anesthesia, and then I could feel whatever the surgery, when the surgery was happening. So because they had to put me under general anesthesia, my husband could not come in there with me. Yeah, so we kissed goodbye. I went into surgery. I remember going into the room, and I was like shaking, you guys. I was shaking. I was shaking like uncontrollably. I don't even know if I was wearing clothes. Like, I feel like I was naked already, but I just remember like being naked, or I was almost naked, and I was like shaking because I was like so scared. I was like, I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't stop moving. I couldn't stop shaking. There was actually like a student nurse there who was also a freaking angel. Oh my gosh, she was such an angel. She was holding my hand the whole time. She's like, it's gonna be okay. And then I remember them, I don't remember if they told me to count or whatever, but I just remember I went in there, I was knocked out. And the way that I woke up is they were pushing, so, you know, they do an incision, like pretty much like where like your pubic hair line starts. So I woke up to them pushing that incision, and they have to push your uterus to get they were pushing the incision, but they were pushing like that area where my uterus is, you know, because they have to get your uterus contracting. And so that's how I woke up, you guys. They just like pushed, and I remember waking up, I was screamed. I was like, ah! Because that right there, like that push, like them pushing your uterus, especially after having a C-section, that hurt so bad. Like the instant like visual that I had in my head. I don't know if you guys have watched Game of Thrones, but if you have watched Game of Thrones, you know, I love that show. I watched the whole series multiple times. If you watch Game of Thrones, you know the time when Theon Greyjoy or Reek was being tortured. That's like the visual that I had. Okay, I felt like I was like strapped to a bed and being tortured. So I woke up to them pushing my incision, and I was like, "What the?" And then, um, and then I hear, oh my gosh, these are tears of joy. And then I heard my baby cry. I heard my baby cry. I didn't get to see my baby. You know how typically when you give birth, whether it's a C-section with local anesthesia or whether you give birth vaginally, you know, you get to like see your baby for the first time. I honestly don't remember seeing my baby for the first time because when I woke up, the first thing I saw was the ceiling of the hospital room, but I just heard my baby cry off to the side, and I was like, I just heard a baby cry, and I was like, is that my baby? They're like, yes, it is. And my husband was like to the side. I was back like in the labor and delivery room. My husband was to the side holding the baby, and I was just laying there, and I couldn't like move or anything yet, but I just heard her cry, and then I started crying, tears of joy. And I was just asking him, I was like, what does she look like? And he was just like, you'll see, like, you'll see her, like, when you know, you'll see her when you see her. Well, not like that, but you know what I mean? Like, you'll see. And I was like, no, describe her. I'm like laying like this. I'm like, describe her. And he was like, you'll see her. And I was like, does she have my eyes? And he was just like, well, they're not brown. They're not my eyes. Because you can't, you know how when babies, well, sometimes babies, like their eyes are like a weird kind of color. And I still don't know what color my baby's eyes are. They're like a dark gray. I think they're like greenish gray, but they're like really dark. But anyway, then they pushed my uterus again. They pushed my uterus again, and I like let out like a blood curdling scream again. And I was like, this is torture. This is torture. And I was like, how many times more do you guys have to do that? They're like 5 or 6. And I was like, no, like, I'm like, I'm not, I can't do that. No, like, no. So then after that, I guess so what happened before I went into surgery is I ended up spiking a fever, and so they had to give me a COVID test. I was negative, thank God. But because I had a fever, I had to be on you know, I had to stay at the hospital, obviously. So they had me on fluids. And then during, you guys, I had to take antibiotics. And during surgery, my bladder was extremely full. Like I said, it was extremely full. You know how I told you guys my bladder was full and like nobody was doing anything, nobody believed me? Like my bladder was so full that it was like bleeding on the inside, you guys. And then also I had lost a lot of blood in surgery, had to be on antibiotics, fluids, pain medication, obviously, all of that. And so they wheeled me. So, okay, so I had my baby on my chest and then started to, you know, try to breastfeed and all of that. And then they wheeled me to postpartum to like a different area of the hospital. And that's where I would stay for the next, I think I stayed 4 nights there. No, I think I stayed 5 nights there because if I stayed 1 night at the hospital, yeah, I stayed 5 nights in postpartum. Okay, my baby's crying, so I'm gonna have to cut this video off here, but I do want to do a part 2 talking about like recovery and postpartum emotions and all of that. Yeah, I gotta go. Thanks for watching. Bye.